Breaking: Paul Ryan may retire from Congress, reports say. Many conservatives and liberals have been split over the current Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, as he's wavered between supporting both traditionally Republican causes as well as traditionally Democratic causes. Now, however, after a long reign in politics, he may be retiring. Politico reports. Spirits were high inside the House chamber on Thursday, November 16, when, in the early afternoon, the gavel fell and a measure to rewrite the American tax code passed on a partisan tally of 227 to 205. As the deciding votes were cast, recorded in green on the black digital scoreboard suspended above the floor, the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, threw his head back and slammed his hands together. Soon he was engulfed in a sea of dark suits, every Republican lawmaker wanting to slap him on the shoulder and be a part of his moment. Ryan was the man of the hour. Having spent a quarter-century in Washington, as an intern, waiter, junior think tanker, Hill staffer and, since 1999, as a member of Congress, he had never wavered in his obsession with fixing what he viewed as the nation's two fundamental weaknesses, its Byzantine tax system and ballooning entitlement state. Now, with House Republicans celebrating the once-in-a-generation achievement of a tax overhaul, Ryan was feeling both jubilant and relieved, and a little bit greedy. Reveling in the afterglow, Ryan remarked to several colleagues how this day had proven they could accomplish difficult things, and that next year, they should set their sights on an even tougher challenge: entitlement reform. The Speaker has since gone public with this aspiration, suggesting that 2018 should be the year Washington finally tackles what he sees as the systemic problems with Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Tinkering with the social safety net is a bold undertaking, particularly in an election year. But Ryan has good reason for throwing caution to the wind: his time in Congress is running short. Despite several landmark legislative wins this year, and a better-than-expected relationship with President Donald Trump, Ryan has made it known to some of his closest confidants that this will be his final term as Speaker. He consults a small crew of family, friends and staff for career advice, and is always cautious not to telegraph his political maneuvers. But the expectation of his impending departure has escaped the hushed confines of Ryan's inner circle and permeated the uppermost echelons of the GOP. In recent interviews with 36 people who know the Speaker, fellow lawmakers, congressional and administration aides, conservative intellectuals and Republican lobbyists, not a single person believed Ryan will stay in Congress past 2018. Ryan was tiring of D.C. even before reluctantly accepting the speakership. He told his predecessor, John Boehner, that it would be his last job in politics, and that it wasn't a long-term proposition. In the months following Trump's victory, he began contemplating the scenarios of his departure. More recently, over closely held conversations with his kitchen cabinet, Ryan's preference has become clear: he would like to serve through Election Day 2018 and retire ahead of the next Congress. This would give Ryan a final legislative year to chase his second white whale, entitlement reform, while using his unrivaled fundraising prowess to help protect the House majority, all with the benefit of averting an ugly internecine power struggle during election season. Ryan has never loved the job. He oozes aggravation when discussing intra-party debates over micro-tactics, and friends say he feels like he's running a daycare center. On a personal level, going home at the end of next year would allow Ryan, who turns 48 next month, to keep promises to family. His 3 children are in or entering their teenage years, and Ryan, whose father died at 55, wants desperately to live at home with them full-time before they begin flying the nest. The best part of this scenario, people close to the Speaker emphasize: he wouldn't have to share the ballot with Trump again in 2020. And yet speculation is building that Ryan, even fresh off his tax reform triumph, might not be able to leave on his own terms. He now faces a massive pileup of cannot-fail bills in January and February. It's an outrageous legislative lift. Congress must, in the coming weeks, fund the government, raise the debt ceiling, modify spending caps, address the continuation of healthcare subsidies, shell out additional funds for disaster relief and deal with the millions of undocumented young immigrants whose protected status has been thrown into limbo. It represents the most menacing stretch of Ryan's speakership, one that will almost certainly require him to break promises made to his conference and give significant concessions to Democrats in exchange for their votes. To meet key deadlines, he'll have to approve sizable spending increases and legal status for minors who came to the U.S. illegally, two things that could raise the ire of the GOP base and embolden his conservative rivals on Capitol Hill. There is no great outcome available, Ryan has conceded to some trusted associates, only survival. Win the day. Win the next day. And then win the week, Ryan has been preaching to his leadership team. The speaker can't afford to admit he's a lame duck. His fundraising capacity and deal-making leverage would be vastly diminished, making the House all the more difficult to govern. When asked at the end of a Thursday morning press conference if he was leaving soon, Ryan shot a quick no over his shoulder as he walked out of the room. Ryan is backed by the vast majority of the GOP conference, but even a small group of dissenters can make the speaker's life miserable, and he knows it. When Ryan succeeded Boehner in the fall of 2015, the new speaker sought to eliminate, or at least weaken, the parliamentary tactic that had been used against his predecessor. By filing a motion to vacate the chair, Representative Mark Meadows of North Carolina had found a way to force a vote on the speakership at any time, a potential humiliation that Boehner avoided by retiring. Ryan, working with Boehner's team during the transition, was unsuccessful in banning this practice. But he made it clear to Boehner at the time, and to his own allies upon assuming the speakership, that he would not serve at the whims of Meadows and the House Freedom Caucus, a group of some 35 conservative hardliners. In an interview this fall with Politico magazine, Ryan said the motion to vacate doesn't loom large as a constant threat to his job security. No, because it's not a job I ever wanted in the first place, Ryan said. If I was dying to be speaker, I guess it probably would be a dagger over my head. But I don't think like that. Members of the Freedom Caucus don't necessarily believe this rhetoric from Ryan, but they respect the strategic advantage it gives him. After all, when Boehner left town, Ryan was the only consensus replacement, and even then, members had to beg him to assume the most powerful office on Capitol Hill. Given that history, any conservative who attempts to overthrow Ryan would make the Freedom Caucus, and its two leaders, Meadows and Ohio Representative Jim Jordan, look like nihilists who collect speakers' scalps for sport. This is especially true without any obvious, universally acceptable successor waiting in the wings. There are no more golden boys left, Meadows said in an interview, discussing the possibility of Ryan's departure. Ryan's problems are not limited to the Freedom Caucus. There is, without question, wider discontent in the conference than the speaker appreciates, with legislators across the ideological and experiential spectrums grumbling about a hyper-centralized process that gives them a vote on the floor but little else. That said, it requires a special brand of gumption to go after the speaker's gavel, and the usual suspects can be found in and on the periphery of the Freedom Caucus. These members, who have been eerily quiet for much of 2017, have begun making noise about a mutiny. The expectation of a major betrayal on Ryan's part, either on spending levels, immigration or a combination of the two, has prompted incessant chatter in recent weeks of someone filing a motion to vacate the chair, perhaps as soon as next month. This could be gamesmanship, a bluff to make Ryan feel pressure to step aside. But with a sudden, pervasive sense that Ryan might be ready to leave anyway, a motion to vacate would make sense as a test of his desire to stay on the job. Either way, the convergence of these realizations, Ryan wanting to retire after 2018, and a possible threat to his speakership even sooner, has sparked a flurry of activity in the offices of Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Majority Whip Steve Scalise, the two most likely successors to Ryan. Both believed Ryan would leave late next year and were therefore planning their next steps at an appropriately deliberate pace. This has abruptly changed, according to multiple GOP sources. Both McCarthy and Scalise have taken recent meetings with members loyal to them who have been eager to strategize about life after Ryan. There is little chance Scalise runs against McCarthy, but the whip, knowing McCarthy lacked the votes to become Speaker in 2015, prompting Ryan to accept the job, is taking careful stock of the conference, preparing to launch his own candidacy should McCarthy stumble a second time. The one person who can keep these dominoes from falling, at least in the near term, is Trump. The president and the speaker have been a better pairing than anyone could have imagined a year ago, considering Ryan abandoned the GOP nominee during the home stretch of the 2016 campaign. The speaker has kept shoulder to shoulder with the White House at moments of vulnerability, knowing Trump can shield him, and his members, from the fury of the right. If the president endorses whatever grotesque legislative meatball comes out of the House in the coming weeks, publicly and unambiguously, it's impossible to see Ryan facing any real threat. If the president distances himself from the speaker, however, the floodgates could open, and quickly. Conservatives, having whispered in the president's ear about Ryan not sharing his interests, will be watching carefully for cues. So too will Steve Bannon, who has been conspicuous this year in holding his fire on Ryan, an old nemesis, while laying waste to Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell. Bannon and Meadows, a pair of disruptive forces, have spent the past year keeping Ryan's blood out of the water, but in the unlikely scenario that Trump suddenly sours on the House Speaker, they will be inviting the sharks to dinner. Underscoring all of this palace intrigue are some strange realities, such as the fact that Ryan's survival as Speaker might require cover from the very president who once believed that Ryan was trying to sabotage his presidential campaign. Or the notion that Ryan, should he secure his final year in office, will use it to pursue the type of dramatic, politically risky entitlement reforms that Trump explicitly ruled out while running for president. Perhaps no piece of irony is more striking, or effective in capturing this volatile period of Republican history, than the juxtaposition between Ryan celebrating his dream of rewriting the tax code, while hearing of renewed threats to his speakership.